Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel continued its relentless attacks across the Gaza Strip overnight, killing at least 27 Palestinians one day after Israel unilaterally withdrew from the Gaza ceasefire and launched massive new strikes. At least 5 international aid workers were rushed to Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah after they were injured in an Israeli airstrike that targeted a United Nations facility. The group Defense for Children denounced the massacre of at least 174 children by Israeli forces on Tuesday, calling it, quote, one of the largest one-day child death tolls in Gaza's history. Defense for Children Palestine wrote in a statement, quote, Israeli forces have signed a death warrant for Palestinian children in Gaza as they carry out nonstop attacks, continue to destroy civilian infrastructure, and prevent any humanitarian aid from reaching Palestinians in need. This is nothing short of a genocide, they said. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has said he's outraged by the new wave of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza that have killed well over 400 people since Monday. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened the latest bombardment campaign on Gaza is only the beginning and said all future ceasefire talks will now take place under fire. Families of the remaining and recently released hostages have joined protests urging Netanyahu to return to the negotiating table. Protests broke out around the world Tuesday, condemning Israel's renewed bombardment of Gaza, shattering the ceasefire agreement with Hamas. Here in New York, hundreds of protesters gathered in Times Square Tuesday. Democracy Now! Was there. This is Isabella Titi of the Palestinian Youth Movement.
I think our movement is only growing. More and more people are conscious about what's happening in Palestine, and the attack that we're feeling right now in the U.S. on our First Amendment rights is showing us that the U.S. is willing to do anything in order to protect its relationship with Israel, and it will not be met with silence.
Mahmoud Khalil has called himself a political prisoner in his first direct remarks to the public since federal immigration agents arrested him without a warrant on March 8th in Columbia University housing. In a letter dictated over the phone from an ICE jail in Jena, Louisiana, Mahmoud Khalil decried his arrest, anti-Palestinian racism by both the Biden and Trump administrations, and the inhumane conditions faced by immigrant detainees. His open letter reads, quote, my arrest was a direct consequence of exercising my right to free speech as I advocated for a free Palestine and an end to the genocide in Gaza. While I await legal decisions that hold the futures of my wife and child in the balance, those who enabled my targeting remain comfortably at Columbia University. Knowing fully that this moment transcends my individual circumstances, I hope nonetheless to be free to witness the birth of my firstborn child, unquote. Mahmoud Khalil is a green card holder. His wife, Noor Abdullah, is a U.S. citizen who's 8 months pregnant. Khalil's legal team has filed a motion with a federal court in New York asking for his immediate release. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts issued a rare statement Tuesday rebuking President Trump and his allies for their calls to impeach federal judges who rule against the administration. Roberts wrote, quote, for more than 2 centuries, it's been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose, unquote. Roberts' statement came after Trump repeatedly attacked U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, who ordered the Trump administration to stop using the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to deport immigrants. On social media, President Trump called Boasberg a, quote, radical left lunatic of a judge and a troublemaker and an agitator. Numerous Trump officials have openly threatened to defy court orders. Meanwhile, Judge Boasberg has accused the administration of adopting an approach of, quote, we don't care, we'll do what we want, unquote. We'll have more on this story later in the broadcast. In Colorado, dozens of people gathered for a rally Tuesday evening demanding the release of longtime immigrant rights leader Jeanette Vizqueta, who was ambushed during a work break on Monday and taken into custody by Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents. She's now being jailed at an ICE detention center in Aurora, run by the private prison company Geo Group. In a phone call from inside detention, Vizqueta shared this message with supporters who held a vigil outside the ICE jail in the freezing rain Tuesday.
I want you to know I'm not going to surrender. I'm going to keep fighting, and even if they remove me, I'm going to continue doing binational work, and they are not going to silence my voice.
Jeanette Vizqueta drew national attention in 2017 when she took sanctuary in a Denver church, along with her 4 children, 3 of whom are U.S.-born, to avoid deportation. She's lived in the United States for nearly 30 years, since leaving Mexico City in 1997 with her husband and her then 6-year-old daughter. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston condemned her arrest as a Putin-style persecution of political dissidents. Later in the broadcast, we'll go to Colorado to speak with Jeanette Vizqueta's daughter, Luna Baez. Russia's military launched fresh attacks on Ukraine overnight, firing dozens of drones toward the capital and bombing the eastern city of Sumy, where a drone strike on a hospital forced the evacuation of more than 100 patients. Meanwhile, Russian officials said a Ukrainian drone attack triggered a fire at an oil terminal in the southern region of Krasnodar. The violence came just hours after Russia said President Vladimir Putin had agreed to pause attacks on energy targets temporarily during a 2-hour phone call with President Trump. According to the Kremlin, Putin declined to endorse a full 30-day ceasefire and emphasized any deal is contingent on the U.S. and its allies halting all military aid and intelligence to Ukraine. The Kremlin's readout of the call directly contradicts this comment by President Trump on Fox News.
We didn't talk about aid, actually. We didn't talk about aid at all. We talked about a lot of things, but aid was never discussed.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he would likely support the new, more limited ceasefire, though he was waiting for more information about it. Zelensky scheduled to speak by phone with Trump later today. Meanwhile, Germany's outgoing government has agreed to send an additional €3 billion worth of military aid to Ukraine. Germany's defense minister blasted Trump's agreement with Putin, saying it counts for nothing, and said Trump would have to win greater concessions. A federal judge in Maryland ruled Tuesday that Elon Musk's unilateral efforts to dismantle the U.S. Agency for International Development are likely unconstitutional in multiple ways. U.S. District Judge Theodore Chuang ordered Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency to reinstate computer and email access to current USAID workers and bars DOJ from taking further action. However, it's not clear whether the ruling will have any impact on reopening USAID after the Trump administration effectively shuttered the agency. President Trump blasted Judge Chuang's ruling and promised an appeal, telling Fox News, quote, "We have rogue judges that are destroying our country," unquote. President Trump's fired the 2 Democratic-appointed commissioners on the Federal Trade Commission in a direct challenge to a 90-year-old Supreme Court ruling protecting independent government agencies. Trump's order terminating Alvaro Bedoya and Rebecca Kelly Slaughter leaves the FTC with just 2 Republican-appointed commissioners, short of the 3 needed to form a quorum to perform many of the agency's functions. In a statement, Alvaro Bedoya said, quote, "The FTC is an independent agency founded 111 years ago to fight fraudsters and monopolists. Our staff is unafraid of the Martin Shkreli's and the Jeff Bezoses of the world. They take them to court and they win. Now the president wants the FTC to be a lapdog for his golfing buddies. I'll see the president in court," Bedoya added. Delaware Senate has approved a bill that would shield corporations from shareholder accountability in a state where 2/3 of all Fortune 500 companies are registered. The legislation is backed by Democratic Governor Matt Meyer and was written by the law firm that represents Tesla and Elon Musk. The bill would make it harder for shareholders to access internal corporate documents and communications and would give corporations more protections from shareholder lawsuits and conflict of interest cases. A Delaware House committee is voting today on the legislation, which critics have condemned as the billionaire's bill. If approved, it'll restore Elon Musk's 2018 CEO pay package at Tesla, worth $56 billion, the largest ever for a publicly traded corporation, before it was voided by a Delaware judge following a shareholder lawsuit. Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwandan President Paul Kagame have called for an immediate ceasefire in the eastern DRC following peace talks in Doha mediated by Qatar's government. They were the first direct talks between the nations since Rwanda-backed M23 fighters seized two major cities in the eastern DRC earlier this year in a major offensive that left 7,000 people dead. Tuesday's talks in Qatar came after M23 representatives backed out of scheduled peace talks in Angola's capital. Turkish police have arrested Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu on what his supporters say are trumped-up corruption charges ahead of primary elections scheduled for Sunday. İmamoğlu is a major challenger to Turkey's authoritarian president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. In 2022, he was found guilty of insulting public officials and sentenced to prison, but has remained free pending an appeal. Turkish police also arrested 100 other people, including one of İmamoğlu's close aides. Authorities have also closed roads around Istanbul and banned protests in the city for 4 days, while restricting access to social media sites. And Hungary's parliament has approved a bill banning LGBTQ+ pride events and allowing law enforcement to use facial recognition technology to identify people who violate the ban. The new law was backed by Prime Minister Viktor Orban and his far-right populist party. As lawmakers voted Tuesday, opposition MPs set off rainbow-colored smoke bombs inside Parliament. Amnesty International said in a statement, quote, "The spurious justification for the passing of this law, that events and assemblies would be harmful to children, is based on harmful stereotypes and deeply entrenched discrimination, homophobia, and transphobia," unquote. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.